In the eighth and final section of the mental status examination training, we will learn about psychosis. My name is Tom Field, and I produced and narrated this training series. Let's return to the overview. In this training series, we have learned via a scaffolding process. In this section of the training, we will learn about psychosis, and during guided practice activities, we will review affect and mood, thought process, memory, motor, speech, interpersonal and intrapersonal issues. At the conclusion of this eighth section is the end of training test. I encourage you to follow the handout as we progress. You can use scrap paper for guided practice. There's also a sheet available for this. And there will be occasions when viewing guided practice video case studies when a section of the mental status examination is not fully evident, and on those occasions it is okay to indicate unable to assess. The definition of psychosis is beliefs and perceptual experiences that are idiosyncratic, not experienced by others, and outside the realm of realistic possibility. Psychosis includes both delusions and hallucinations. The definition of a delusion is a fixed belief that is experienced as odd, strange, or eccentric by others and outside the realm of realistic possibility. This belief is associated most commonly with schizophrenia. The definition of hallucination is a sensory perception that is not experienced by others. This sensory perception is associated with schizophrenia, but also bipolar disorder, depression, delirium, and substance abuse. There are forms of hallucinations that are sleep-related. Hypnagogic hallucinations occur when an individual is falling asleep. Hypnopompic hallucinations occur when an individual is awakening from sleep. And if an individual only has hallucinations when falling or awakening from sleep, these hallucinations might be considered normal or typical. The delusions explored in this section of the training include bizarre, control, grandeur, infidelity, persecution, reference, and erotomanic delusions. The types of hallucinations explored in this section of the training include responding to internal stimuli. Not covered in depth, but important for you to know about, are types of hallucinations. These correspond to the 5 aspects of the human sensory system. Auditory, which have to do with hearing, for example, hearing voices. Visual hallucinations, which have to do with vision, for example, seeing an image of something that isn't really there. Olfactory hallucinations, which have to do with smell, for example, the smell of burnt toast, say. Gustatory hallucinations, which have to do with taste, for example, the taste of milk. And tactile hallucinations, which have to do with touch. A common tactile hallucination is the feeling of spiders running up and down the skin. Usually, you won't be able to tell which kind of hallucinations a client is experiencing without their verbal disclosure. The obvious exception to this is tactile hallucinations, when a client may itch or scratch frantically. Note that, even in this example, the individual may also experience tactile hallucinations without scratching, so a verbal disclosure is usually required. Thus, counselors should ask directly about hallucinations, similarly as they would for suicidal ideation. And that's the reason we are not covering these 5 aspects of hallucinations in depth through video case studies, because typically these are not indicated on the mental status examination unless the client gives a verbal disclosure that they are experiencing one of these things. Genuine hallucinations are typically frightening to the individual, whereas pseudo-hallucinations are not. The latter is associated with malingering, personality disorders, and substance abuse. As an aside, be attentive to any reports of olfactory or gustatory hallucinations. These can be symptoms of stroke or brain tumors. A famous example is when a person smells smoke that is not really there. Not covered in this section of the training in depth, but important for you to know about, is appearance. Appearance has two major facets, grooming and dress. Both exist on a continuum from low level to high level. For grooming, a low level of grooming is unkempt or disheveled. A high level of grooming is immaculate, and a balanced level of grooming is well groomed. For dress, a low level of grooming is underdressed, and a high level of grooming is overdressed, and a balanced level is appropriate dress. Appearance is often its own section in mental status examination assessments. However, the reason that we are not covering this in depth through video case study is that, in my clinical experience, appearance has only been of clinical interest when a client is unkempt or disheveled, which is usually associated with psychosis or developmental disability. While immaculate and overdressed clients may be hypothesized to be conceited or compulsive, I have found that this is rarely the case. As an aside, when a client is underdressed, it becomes clinically important, especially when paired with flirtatious or regressed behavior. Here is an example of what to write if no psychotic symptoms are apparent. The client's appearance was well groomed with appropriate dress. The client denied symptoms of psychosis, hallucinations, delusions. Note here that the client denied, meaning that the interviewer or the clinician asked. So let's explore psychosis in a bit more detail through some video case studies. A bizarre delusion is described as a fixed belief outside the realm of realistic possibility. This belief is strange, odd, and eccentric to others. So I'm still trying to understand what exactly you meant when you said that you're half donut and half human.
It's the same thing. My dad made me in the donut shop. So, yeah, I'm a person, but where I started was in the middle of all these donuts.
And how does that make you half donut and half human?
Because my dad had made half of me.
This client's defensive rationalization of a bizarre and odd belief of being half woman and half donut seems flimsy, yet they themselves are convinced of such an eccentric belief. And it is this degree of being convinced of the belief that makes it a delusion. A control delusion is described as an individual's fixed belief that their will or thoughts or feelings are being controlled by someone or something else.
So this is what's going on. Aliens are trying to get into my brain. They haven't gotten it completely, but they put a microchip in there. And I think they're trying to control my thoughts, but it's not, I'm not really sure what's going on yet. I've been trying to communicate with them, and I actually get better reception through the chip if I'm higher up, like if I'm in a really high building or something like that. That's why I've been spending a lot of time on the roof.
This client believes their thoughts are controlled by aliens, and the strength of their belief has resulted in changes to their behavior. For example, they believe that elevation is a means to access communication with aliens, and so they've been spending a lot of time on the roof. And you can see here how the client's degree of being convinced in their belief causes real-life changes to their behavior and actions. Grandeur delusion is described as an individual's fixed belief in their elevated sense of importance or power or specialness. Let's watch an example.
In fact, I've been working on this writing for some time, and I really believe that I could win this Nobel Prize. I've gotten lots of great feedback from other people, and I've tried to talk with my girlfriend about it. She just doesn't get it. She doesn't see how great of a writer I am, and how much I have to offer, and how close I am to winning this Nobel Prize.
In this example, the client believes or is convinced that they are going to receive an outlandish award for their work, and their degree of elevated specialness in regards to their work is well defended. For example, the client mentions that several others have commented on how good his work is, but the person who is fairly critical, and by the way, this is probably the person who knows the client best, their girlfriend, has doubts, and these doubts are rejected because they are not consistent with their delusional belief. Remember, delusions are firmly held beliefs. Infidelity delusion is described as an individual's fixed belief that their partner or lover is being unfaithful to their relationship.
I'm convinced Steve is cheating on me. This week he didn't return my calls. It was he didn't return my calls for 3 hours, and I know he was at work, so I know he was available.
Is it possible, perhaps, that when he didn't return your call, he was just busy at work?
No, I really think he's cheating on me. I know if he wasn't cheating on me, he would have returned my calls. He always returns my calls.
This client infers that because they have not received return phone calls at work from their husband, that he is cheating on her. The attempts of the interviewer to interrogate this are met with resistance because of the strength of the client's belief. Of course, if her husband really was cheating, then this would not be a delusion. A persecution delusion is described as an individual's fixed belief that they are being harassed or persecuted by others. Let's watch an example.
I know that the FBI is monitoring me. I know that they've put bugs in my apartment, in my lights and things. I just haven't found them yet. They're really small and they're really difficult to find. And I know they're listening to my conversations. I can hear that click when I pick up the telephone, and I know that they're tapping my phone, and every time I leave the house, a car follows me. The car on the corner. It's not always the same car, but I know that it's the FBI following me.
This client experiences a very common example of a persecution delusion. She believes the FBI are tapping her phones and following her in a parked car. This kind of fear can have a large impact on a person's functioning. Clients with this kind of persecution delusion may, for example, refuse to talk on the phone or refuse to leave the house. A reference delusion is described as an individual's fixed belief that unrelated events in the external environment are special messages that have a direct personal significance and relevance to them.
I was watching the news last night, and there was a story on about the war in Syria, and they were talking to this soldier about the war, and then at the end of the story, the reporter said to him, "Be careful out there." And I knew that he was talking to me. I knew that he was talking to me about work, and that meant that I need to watch my back, because Joe is going to try to make it look like I'm not doing my job so that he can take my job.
This client infers that the news reporter's statement, "Be careful out there," is directly related to their own personal life. For example, a warning that a co-worker will try to take their job. Reference delusions are also called ideas of reference in the literature. Erotomanic delusions are described as an individual's fixed belief that someone else is in love with them or wants to have sexual intercourse with them. To be classified as a delusion, this has to be unrequited. Let's watch an example.
So I notice when I come in that your receptionist, she's just really eyeing me up, looking at me. I think she really likes me. I think she got a thing for me. I can just tell that she's really attracted to me.
We have talked about this before. She really doesn't have those kinds of feelings for you.
Now, how would you know that? I beg to differ.
This client infers that a receptionist has made romantic feelings for him, or has romantic feelings for him based on glances that she has given, for example, eyeing me up. Again, attempts by the interviewer to interrogate this are met with resistance because of the strength of the client's belief. Responding to internal stimuli is described as when an individual seems to be attentively listening and responding to sights and sounds in their external environment that others do not see or hear. Let's watch an example.
Yeah. No, I think so. Yeah.
This client seems to be having a conversation with someone not in the room. Actions such as laughter, nodding, and shaking one's head, independent of an interpersonal interaction, may suggest that a person is hearing sensory input that others do not experience. As an aside, it is rare for clients to respond to internal stimuli that is not an auditory hallucination. For example, it is rare for a client to verbally respond to visual, olfactory, gustatory, or tactile hallucinations, independent of interpersonal context. It's now time for you to try your hand at coding for psychosis on the mental status examination. In the following series of video case studies, you are going to be coding for affect, mood, form of thought, attention and speed of thought, memory, consciousness, speech, interpersonal, intrapersonal, and appearance. And remember, for appearance you are coding for both dress and grooming. In addition, you are also going to code for psychosis, looking at delusions and responding to internal stimuli. Let's watch the first video.
I'm just so tired of my teacher making all of these tests hard just so that I will fail. I know that's what he's doing. It doesn't matter about the rest of the students, but he makes the exams so difficult that all of the questions, I can't even possibly pass the test because of how he tricks us on the questions. And I know he's doing it because he doesn't like me. It doesn't matter about the rest of the students.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect, mood, form of thought, attention and speed of thought, memory, consciousness, speech, interpersonal, intrapersonal, appearance, and psychosis. This client has a blunted or flat affect. Their mood seems dysphoric. In terms of thought process, they have some loose associations. There is a very vague connection made between the difficulty of a test and their teacher somehow wanting to persecute them. In terms of attention, there is some possible rumination here. In terms of motor movement, it seems relaxed, not agitated, despite the irritability. We are unable to assess memory at this time. Speech seems regular rate and rhythm. We are unable to assess interpersonal issues. The client may be cooperative, defensive, dismissive, even contemptuous. We don't know yet because we haven't seen the client's interaction with the interviewer. The client appears to be catastrophizing somewhat. Her appearance seems well groomed with appropriate dress, and she is experiencing a persecution delusion because she believes that the instructor is out to get her. Let's watch the second video case study.
I'll tell you how I know Donnie's been cheating on me. When Donnie comes home, the dog gives me a wink. And when the dog gives me a wink, I know Donnie's done something wrong. And when the dog gives me a wink, I know it's a sign. He's giving me a sign that Donnie's done something wrong.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect, mood, form of thought, attention and speed of thought, memory, consciousness, speech, interpersonal, intrapersonal, appearance, and psychosis. This client has a blunted or flat affect. Their mood seems to be euthymic. In terms of thought process, they seem to have loose associations, their form of thought. We are unable to assess memory at this time. Their motor seems relaxed. Their speech is regular rate and rhythm. There is some possible defensiveness, although we could code unable to assess for interpersonal, because the client starts with, quote, "I'll tell you why." No intrapersonal issues were apparent. Her appearance seems well groomed with appropriate dress, and she is experiencing a reference delusion because she interprets the dog winking as a sign that Donnie has done something wrong. Let's watch the third video case study.
No. No. No.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect, mood, form of thought, attention and speed of thought, memory, consciousness, speech, interpersonal, intrapersonal, appearance, and psychosis. The client's affect here is again blunted and flat. She seems concerned, almost dysphoric, for her mood. We are unable to assess her form of thought. In terms of attention, she does seem preoccupied. We are unable to assess memory. Her motor seems restless. We are unable to assess speech. She may possibly be laconic. There's also possible hypervigilance in terms of interpersonal, because she looks around the environment a lot, though this would be differentially diagnosed from responding to internal stimuli. And so I would code unable to assess here. We are unable to assess intrapersonal issues. Her appearance is well groomed with appropriate dress, and she appears to be responding to internal stimuli. As an aside, her preoccupied attention seems to be linked to responding to the internal stimuli, because she looks around the room and responds to what cannot be heard she appears to be somewhat preoccupied in terms of her thought process. Let's watch the final video case study.
I started writing letters again this week to Leonardo DiCaprio. I know that he wants me to write these letters. I sent out maybe 5 a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't hear anything back, but I know that he feels the same way and that he keeps all my letters, and I know he wants me to keep writing to him.
Pause the video now and assess the client for affect, mood, form of thought, attention and speed of thought, memory, consciousness, speech, interpersonal, intrapersonal, appearance, and psychosis. This client has a full and congruent affect. Their mood seems euthymic. They appear to have a somewhat logical form of thought. In terms of their attention, they seem to have some possible rumination. They seem to be a bit obsessional about Leonardo DiCaprio. However, we would need more information here. Their motor seems relaxed or even hypoactive. Their speech is regular rate and rhythm. We are unable to assess memory, although this might be intact. She mentions keeping all of his letters. We are unable to assess interpersonal issues. There might be possible grandiosity here, by the way, in terms of intrapersonal, because the client seems to have some feeling of perhaps specialness in terms of her relationship with a celebrity, although we would need to investigate this further, so unable to assess for intrapersonal. Her appearance seems well-groomed with appropriate dress, and she is experiencing an erotomanic delusion, because despite the lack of reciprocity from Leonardo DiCaprio, her love is unrequited, so to say. She has a very firm belief that this celebrity is in love with her. So let's review. Today we learned about psychosis and explored delusions, bizarre, control, grandeur, infidelity, persecution, reference, and erotomanic, hallucinations, responding to internal stimuli, types of hallucinations that has to do with the 5 sensorium, auditory, visual, olfactory, gustatory, and tactile hallucinations, and appearance, looking at both grooming and dress.